Hello, my name is Ezemwa Ungbunu, and the topic of this discussion is how to cure heartburn and gastroesophageal reflux disease naturally. Now, heartburn is a fairly common condition in our modern society, and heartburn is caused by the movement of stomach acid from the stomach into the esophagus. The stomach is a highly specialized organ. It has a thick mucosal lining in its interior that protects it from the corrosive effects of stomach acid. This prevents stomach acid from essentially digesting the stomach. But when stomach acid abnormally moves into the esophagus, it damages and irritates the sensitive lining of the esophagus because the esophagus has no such protective lining. And it's that damage and irritation of the esophagus that creates that burning sensation in the mid-chest that we know as heartburn. Gastroesophageal reflux disease is a severe form of heartburn where the heartburn disease process has progressed to such an extent that the esophagus has incurred substantial damage, and the substantial damage to the esophagus creates additional symptoms. So GERD is essentially a severe form of chronic heartburn. In the conventional understanding, heartburn is a result of excess stomach acid. So there is too much stomach acid production, and that causes some of it to move or be refluxed into the esophagus. And based on that understanding, the standard of care of heartburn is to take acid-suppressing medications. After all, if the problem is too much stomach acid, the solution must be to reduce or to stop stomach acid production. So heartburn is treated with all manner of acid-suppressing medications, Prilosec, Prevacid, Nexium, and then over-the-counter medications like Pepto-Bismol, Tums, and so on and so on. It's a long list, and it's a very, very big industry. The heartburn industry is a very large industry. According to a Business Week article in 2001, Prilosec was the single largest selling prescription drug in the United States, and it made $6 billion that year for its manufacturer, AstraZeneca. Now, this multi-billion-dollar drug empire is in fact built on a big fat lie, because heartburn is not caused by excess stomach acid, as is being explained by these pharmaceutical drugs and also by many doctors. Heartburn is caused by the opposite. Heartburn results from low stomach acid. Now, in this talk, I would like to explain how low stomach acid is in fact the root cause of heartburn. And this is a fact borne out in the scientific literature. Even a cursory search on any research article database on heartburn, you will find that there is no association between excess stomach acid and heartburn. In fact, it's always the opposite. In about 90% of heartburn cases, you have low stomach acid secretion. So this begs a huge question. Why is the pharmaceutical industry propagating this huge lie? Well, in my opinion, it boils down to profits. Because when you give somebody with heartburn an acid-suppressing drug, you actually worsen and intensify the disease process. Because the root problem is low stomach acid, you further suppress the low stomach acid with these drugs, and then you now drive the disease process. You can understand this intuitively because many people on heartburn medications never get off those heartburn medications. Once you get on that treadmill, you never get off that treadmill. People who take heartburn medications take them for several years and even decades, and over that period, the symptoms often just worsen. So let me get into the details of how low stomach acid is in fact the root cause of heartburn, and it's borne out in the scientific literature. So let's look at the stomach in a bit more detail. The stomach is a muscular sac with a thick mucosal lining that protects it from the corrosive effects of stomach acid, and the stomach is wrapped with various layers of muscles, so it's a highly dynamic organ. It digests food both chemically and mechanically. So the stomach generates quite substantial mechanical forces to literally grind and mash food. I wish I could show some animation of the stomach in action, because it's truly astounding the types of forces that it generates, and we don't notice it just because our nerves are not attuned to signal that motion to us. But there is substantial motion going on every time we eat a meal. So the stomach is both a mechanical grinder and then a chemical digester. So heartburn, the first step is low stomach acid. And out of the scientific literature, we find that about 90% of heartburn cases, they have been found to have low stomach acid. So low stomach acid creates unique problems for the stomach, because stomach acid serves various functions. It helps to digest proteins. It helps us to extract certain nutrients from food, like many vitamins and minerals. And it also is hugely important for regulating the number and diversity of bacteria in the stomach, because the digestive tract, that is that continuous tube that runs from your mouth to your anus, is colonized by hundreds of or thousands of species of bacteria, of yeast, of fungi, and also various parasites and worms. But the stomach is quite unique in that stomach acid kills most strains of bacteria, yeast, fungi, parasites. So compared to the small intestines and compared to the large intestines, the stomach is a largely sterile compartment. And that low level of bacteria and the low diversity of bacteria is in fact essential for the function of the stomach. So the stomach is a compartment that does not require bacteria for optimal function. That is very different than the, let's say, the large intestine, which in fact requires large numbers and a large diversity of many types of beneficial and commensal bacteria to function optimally. So the stomach is quite different. So low stomach acid allows for bacterial overgrowth. And this is the next step in the heartburn disease process. When you have low stomach acid, the stomach now becomes an ideal environment for bacterial growth, because the stomach is dark, it's moist, and it's full of nutrients. And there is no stomach acid to kill any of the bacteria, so you have rapid bacterial growth of various types of pathogenic bacteria, that is harmful bacteria, H. pylori, Staphylococcus, C. difficile, E. coli, and on, a quite long list of various types of pathogenic bacteria now colonize and grow in numbers. And bacteria are very intelligent because they continuously communicate with each other to know their numbers. So bacteria at a certain concentration or at a certain number behave in a certain way. And in the stomach, they behave in a harmless way. And in some cases, H. pylori at low concentration has a beneficial effect for the stomach. But these bacteria, as their numbers grow through a mechanism called quorum sensing, they're able to sense how many of themselves there are within a particular area. And once their numbers reach a certain amount, a certain number, once their concentration reaches a certain level, they're able to now alter their behavior. So when bacteria reach a certain concentration, they modulate their behavior and they launch an attack. They become truly pathogenic. They attack the thick mucosal lining that is essential for the stomach's function. They degrade this lining. They infiltrate the stomach wall. And this leads to an immune reaction, because the immune system senses that something is wrong. The body is supremely intelligent, and it's able to recognize any disruption in any part of the body. So the body recognizes that there's an abnormal amount of bacteria in the stomach, and it mounts an immune response. It sends immune cells, your neutrophils, your macrophages, your T cells, your B cells, and they launch an immune response. And that immune response results in chronic inflammation, which is the next step in the heartburn disease process. Because chronic inflammation worsens the functionality of the stomach. Let me give you an instance. Let's say you hit your knee very hard and your knee becomes swollen, it becomes painful, it becomes warm to the touch. All that is an inflammatory response to the damage incurred to the knee, because the inflammatory response is necessary for the body to clear the damaged cells and to heal that tissue. But during that period of inflammation, you have a loss of function of the knee, because your knee is swollen and it's no longer able to bear as much weight, so you walk with a limp, or possibly you might not be able to walk at all, and then you have a loss of range of motion. So inflammation in any organ in the body is associated with a loss of function. So in the case of the stomach, the inflammation that results from the bacterial overgrowth, because remember, the body is trying to kill and destroy these excesses of bacteria, but it's not able to clear it properly. So what you have is an ineffectual immune response, and it becomes chronic because the body is not able to clear those bacteria, because stomach acid is essential, it's hugely important for destroying those bacteria. And without stomach acid, the body is not able to clear those bacteria, so it becomes an ongoing battle, it becomes a chronic process, and then you now have chronic inflammation. So chronic inflammation now leads to the final step of the heartburn disease process, because as I said, there is a loss of function, and the functionality that you lose, one of many, is that it affects the stomach's sphincters. Now, the stomach is a muscular sac lined with various layers of muscles that allow it to engage in dynamic motion. The stomach is able to grind in this direction, it's able to grind in this direction, it's able to grind in multiple directions, highly dynamic motion. But the stomach has two seals, two airlocks, two sphincters. Sphincters are circular muscles that close tightly, similarly to the anus. The anus is also a sphincter, a circular ring of muscles that seals tightly. So the stomach has two sphincters, one at the base where the stomach joins the small intestine. This is the pyloric sphincter, and another one at the top of the stomach where the stomach joins with the esophagus. This is called the lower esophageal sphincter. And these two sphincters are hugely important, because as the stomach is engaging in that highly dynamic grinding motion, those two seals is what prevents the contents of the stomach from refluxing both into the esophagus and down into the small intestine. So it's hugely important for those seals to be intact and to be strong. So chronic inflammation weakens the lower esophageal sphincter. So you have a weakened LES. That is this sphincter. And you can imagine that will create real problems, because when you eat a meal, this seal will open abnormally because it's no longer as tight as it used to be. So as the stomach is engaging in highly dynamic motion, the contents of the stomach, both stomach acid, both protein digesting enzymes, are able to shoot out as the stomach is grinding. So this is the root cause of heartburn. When your lower esophageal sphincter is weakened, the contents of the stomach are able to move out of the stomach. Now, acid suppressing drugs provide symptomatic relief, because even though you have a weakened LES, when you take an acid suppressing drug, you reduce the stomach acid. So even though the contents of the stomach are still coming out, are still refluxed, when you take an acid suppressing drug, there is less stomach acid, and so there's less stomach acid to irritate the esophagus or to damage the esophagus. But notice that does not get to the root of the process, and it worsens it, because you will have more bacterial overgrowth, more chronic inflammation, your LES will become more dysfunctional, and then more bacterial overgrowth, and so on and so forth. It's a vicious circle. So now that we understand the mechanism of heartburn, that is the root cause of heartburn, now it's quite simple to actually resolve heartburn. So heartburn is a very curable condition, but it requires certain interventions, and it requires the application or the utilization of those interventions over an extended period of weeks and months to allow the body to heal the weakened LES. Because once you have been able to heal or restore the functional integrity of the lower esophageal sphincter, you have essentially cured heartburn. So the first thing to do is to stop taking acid-suppressing drugs, because excess stomach acid is not the cause of heartburn. So taking an acid-suppressing drug only worsens the disease process. So your Prilosec, your Nexiums, your Tums, your Pepto-Bismol, all those things will grant you symptomatic relief, but over the long term, they're going to worsen your heartburn and you become more dependent. So stop taking acid-suppressing drugs. In addition, avoid or eliminate refined carbohydrates from your diet, because in naturally treating heartburn, we're targeting two processes: bacterial overgrowth in the stomach and chronic inflammation in the stomach. So all interventions that I'll describe are really tailored to those two processes, inflammation and bacterial overgrowth. So avoiding refined carbohydrates helps, because refined carbohydrates like table sugar, white flour, and high fructose corn syrup that you get from foods like soft drinks, pastries, white bread, and also pasta and things of that sort, many packaged processed foods, these refined carbohydrates are fuel for pathogenic strains of bacteria, H. pylori, E. coli, C. difficile, Staphylococcus, also yeast like Candida. All these microorganisms love refined carbohydrates, and it fuels their growth. So once you minimize intake of refined carbohydrates, you also gradually resolve the bacterial overgrowth, because the bacteria require fuel. Once you cut off their fuel, you reduce their numbers, and then you now have targeted one of the primary drivers of heartburn. So additionally, it's important to avoid or eliminate, and preferably to eliminate, fried foods. And this is for two reasons. Fried foods are loaded with toxins, because when you fry food, the temperatures at which you fry foods are very, very high. So at those high temperatures, in excess of 300 degrees Celsius, the nutrients in food are actually converted into toxins, into carcinogens. For example, carbohydrates are converted into acrylamides. Vegetable oil is converted into hydroxynonenal. Proteins are converted into heterocyclic amines, and so on. These are all highly toxic compounds. And when we ingest these foods, they increase inflammation in the body, because they further damage the stomach, and then they worsen the inflammatory process that is going on in the stomach. So fried foods are pro-inflammatory. And additionally, the fatty acids that are found in most vegetable oils that are used to fry food, your soy oil, your canola oil, your soybean oil, and so on, are loaded with omega-6 fatty acids. And those fatty acids are pro-inflammatory when they are consumed in excess. So minimizing intake of vegetable oil and minimizing intake of fried foods is hugely important for reducing inflammation in the stomach and also elsewhere in the body, because it has systemic effects as well. So avoiding fried foods is a very useful intervention. In addition, it's very important to drink ginger tea on a daily basis. And you prepare ginger tea with fresh ginger root, not with powdered ginger or ginger tea that's already in a sachet, because the processing of ginger neutralizes and damages a lot of highly active ingredients that you can only get from fresh ginger. So you take fresh ginger, you peel it, and then you slice and chop it into very small pieces. And you take a teaspoon or a tablespoon of this finely chopped ginger, and you add it to a cup of hot water, and then you allow it to steep for like 10 minutes. And ginger resolves heartburn in two very important ways. One, it is a natural antimicrobial. The compounds in ginger are able to destroy many harmful bacteria, your Staphylococcus, your E. coli, your C. difficile, your H. pylori, and it's also a powerful anti-inflammatory. So it helps to cure heartburn in two important ways. It targets two of the fundamental pillars of the heartburn disease process. So drinking fresh ginger tea, and I must emphasize the fresh ginger, is a hugely powerful intervention when you drink it on a daily basis. By the second week, you will start to see results. Another hugely important intervention is to drink lime water on a daily basis. Lime water is useful in treating heartburn because it also has antimicrobial compounds, but also it's a hugely rich source of many alkali minerals, your magnesium, your calcium, your potassium, and I'll place a special emphasis on potassium because potassium is essential for stomach acid production, because if we recall, the root of heartburn is low stomach acid and not excess stomach acid. So when we take potassium-rich foods like lime, we enable the body to increase stomach acid secretion. And the reason why potassium is so important is that the way the stomach acidifies itself is via a protein that is embedded in a cell called the parietal cell. So in the stomach, let me just quickly draw this. So in the stomach, we have what they call parietal cells, and these cells secrete hydrogen, and this hydrogen is what reduces the pH of the stomach, that drops it to a range of anywhere between 2 to 3.5 pH. And this cell achieves this via a protein pump that exchanges potassium for hydrogen, and it takes potassium into the cell and pushes out hydrogen into the interior of the stomach. And that exchange of hydrogen for potassium is what acidifies the stomach. So lime water is very, very useful in that it helps to drive stomach acid secretion, and when we have normal levels of stomach acid, we're able to now regulate the bacteria in the stomach and also reduce inflammation in the stomach and gradually allow the lower esophageal sphincter to heal. In addition, garnish meals with fresh garlic and ginger. Garnish meals with fresh garlic and onions, I mean. And the reason why is that garlic and onions are both natural antimicrobials. In fact, garlic is perhaps nature's most powerful antimicrobial. Its spectrum of activity is truly astounding. Garlic has been found to be active against bacteria, yeast, fungi, protozoa, worms, and even viruses. So garnishing meals with fresh garlic and onions supplies the body with highly active polyphenols and other phytonutrients that will help to resolve the bacterial overgrowth and also control inflammation. So these three interventions, drinking ginger tea, drinking lime water, and garnishing meals with fresh garlic and onions, as well as avoiding these highly processed foods and avoiding fried foods, together form a very, very powerful treatment protocol for heartburn that will set you on the road of recovery within a few weeks. Lastly, a very useful way to resolve bacterial overgrowth is with friendly bacteria, which are also called probiotics. And a great source of probiotics is from fermented food. So you can take a lot of fermented things like yogurt or sauerkraut or kefir and so on. But I wouldn't recommend packaged fermented foods because they have been pasteurized, and in so doing they have killed most of the beneficial bacteria, so that kind of defeats the purpose of eating those foods. So really, out with all those things, all those packaged yogurts, packaged sauerkraut, even bottled olives. Those are all fermented foods, but they don't contain anywhere near the numbers and diversity of probiotics that we actually need to positively affect heartburn. So I would suggest a homemade fermented food, and one that I find to be highly effective is fermented coconut slurry. Coconut is very interesting because it's a natural antimicrobial. Coconut is very rich in a fatty acid called lauric acid. In fact, in nature, it's one of the best sources of lauric acid. Lauric acid is a powerful antimicrobial. So coconut by itself, it's already a very good food to eat when you have heartburn, because it will also help to regulate the balance of bacteria, and it also has anti-inflammatory processes. Some of the monounsaturated fatty acids in coconut have been found to be anti-inflammatory. So, but fermented coconut essentially involves you take a fifth of coconut meat. So, and not a very large piece, you don't need too much, possibly this size of coconut meat, just maybe an inch by 2 inch or 2 inches by 2 inch square of coconut meat. And then you can take also a teaspoon of finely cut, finely chopped ginger, and possibly a teaspoon of finely chopped garlic. So you take these three ingredients, a bit of coconut meat, a little bit of ginger, a little bit of garlic, you add it all to a blender, then add about like 50 cl of water, and then you grind it all up. And what you get is a slurry, right? Because you still have little solid particles and foam and whatnot. So that slurry, you now pour it into a glass jar, into a mason jar, into a glass jar with an airtight lid, and preferably you fill up the jar to the rim. So let's say this is our jar. Ideally, the slurry should be near the top, right? So this is a slurry, it's a fluid, it's a liquid, and near the top, and then the jar should have an airtight lid. So you essentially just pour the slurry in, close the lid, and then you store it at room temperature, because fermentation occurs at room temperature. So you can just put it in a dark closet somewhere and allow it to ferment for a minimum of 24 hours, because by 24 hours you have reasonable populations of friendly bacteria. And because of the antimicrobial activity of coconut, and also when you add garlic and ginger, it regulates the type of bacteria that can grow within that slurry. So only certain strains of bacteria can survive in that medium, and those strains are probiotics, and they actively kill harmful bacteria, and they also adjust the balance of bacteria within the entire digestive tract. But in this case, we're interested with its effect on the stomach. So you can allow it to ferment for 24 hours or even much longer, for several days or even weeks, because the slurry provides enough nutrients for the bacteria to keep on growing and to keep on feeding. So it's a great intervention, and you can drink this as often as you like. It's safe and there are no side effects, and this is more effective than any probiotic that you buy in the market, because those packaged probiotics don't contain anywhere near as many beneficial bacteria in terms of numbers that you will get from a homemade fermented product. So I hope you found this talk useful, and I hope some of the protocols that I discussed will help you in healing your body and to resolve heartburn. Thank you so much for your time.